I used to work the register at a local gas station, but I left after a series of strange events occurred while I was working overnight. But this one incident will stay with me forever. I only worked the night shift a few days per week, usually Friday and Saturday. My shifts were usually boring, and it was a game of trying to stay awake. The only thing I had to do was stock the shelves and occasionally assist customers. On road trips, I would encounter a large number of drunk people or families, as well as entire groups of friends. But for the most part, things were quiet. On this particular night, it was around 2 a.m. and I hadn't had a customer in over an hour, so I was beginning to doze off. The desk was around the corner from the entrance, and there was a bell on the door that rang whenever someone walked in, so usually falling asleep was not a big deal. I awoke after hearing the bell ring, and a few seconds later, I noticed a customer walk in. He resembled a typical 30-year-old man who would stop in for a beer or a snack. He took a short walk down each aisle, taking in everything. Now, I've worked in retail for a long time and know what it's like when someone is looking for something specific, but this man had no idea. He was simply looking at the shelves and browsing the store. This is normal during the day, but people rarely come in at 2 a.m. to browse the gas station shelves. I looked out the window to my left to see if he was filling up his car or simply passing the time. After a few minutes, he looked over at me, said thank you, and walked out. I wasn't sure what to make of that, but I assumed he stole something small and was just being himself. After a few minutes, I forgot about the situation and began to feel tired again. To pass the time, I grabbed my inventory card and began stocking the shelves. I'm not sure how long I was stocking, maybe 20 minutes before I noticed a man approaching the end of the aisle I was stocking. I was startled because I had never heard the doorbell ring before. He was dressed in dark clothing and a large hoodie. I could tell right away that something was off. The man continued down to the back of the store, and I quickly returned to behind the counter. I tried not to stare, but as he walked down the aisles, he didn't seem to be looking for anything. He was simply browsing. It occurred to me right away that this was the same guy from a short time ago, but he had changed clothes for some reason. I also realized that he probably came to check out the place before doing whatever he planned to do. I started panicking in my head. The man began to walk down the aisle closest to the counter, and I noticed something heavy in his front hoodie pocket. I made a split-second decision to speak in order to prevent further escalation. "Do you need help finding something?" He made eye contact with me, and I could tell he understood what I was trying to do. He approached the counter without saying a word. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handgun. Then he took a small pack of gum from beside the counter and put it in front of me. He simply stated. I didn't react for a few seconds, confused and shocked by what was happening, before nervously scanning the gum. Still holding the gun, he removed $1 from his jean pocket, threw it on the counter, thanked, and walked away. I was in complete shock, trying to process what had just happened. I ended up reporting the incident to the police and calling my manager, who did not answer. There were no updates on the situation, but it kept me on edge for the final few months I worked there. I'm still not sure what happened that night or what the man's intentions were, but I'm glad I didn't find out. In my 20s, I got a job as a storage worker at a local warehouse. It was located on the side of a highway near the town's end. To nothing, we always joked about the location and why the company's owners decided to build such a large warehouse in a remote, empty area of town, away from everything. It was probably just cheap land with easy access from the highway, but it always felt strange to be pulled into a large empty parking lot in the middle of nowhere each night. I always worked overnight shifts with one of my coworkers while remaining anonymous and calling him Tyler. Our job was to disassemble and organize the day's shipments before transporting them to their designated storage areas in the warehouse. After a few weeks, it becomes extremely repetitive. Most nights I do easy work while still half asleep. Tyler and I were the only two overnight workers, so we would spend some days working alone. This occurred during Tyler's vacation week, so I was alone at the warehouse from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. every night. It was Wednesday night, and something strange happened right away. When I arrived, a car was parked in the far corner of this large, empty parking lot. Its lights were turned off, and no one appeared to be around it. But being all the way out here on private property was very suspicious. I parked near the entrance door and went inside before calling the cops to come down and have a look. I assumed it was just some teenagers or a broken down car from the highway, but it was on private property and parked in the far corner, which gave me a strange feeling. 20 minutes later, cops arrived at the front door and informed me that the car was empty, with no sign of anyone. They were pretty sure it was broken down too, so we called a tow truck to come down and take it away. And then I went back to work. I moved several shipments, which probably took me about an hour, before being interrupted by a loud bang at the entrance to the building. I quickly walked down, turned on the front lights, and then approached the door. A man stood behind the glass, staring at me with his fist on the door, and he appeared very tired and exhausted. I moved closer and spoke through the glass. "Are you okay? What are you doing here? This is private property." The man stared at me with disgust. "Where is my car?" he yelled, pounding on the door. I tried to explain, but he kept interrupting me and becoming increasingly aggressive, screaming at me to let him inside the building. I threatened to call the cops on him, which finally got him to quiet down. He backed up and gave me another crazy look before walking away. As I returned to work, I couldn't stop thinking about where that man might have been. All this time, I assumed he went to a gas station to get a canister for his car, but he couldn't have walked all the way there and back, and if he had gotten a ride, he would have arrived back before the car was towed. I couldn't think of where the man could have been. That would only make sense after a few minutes of working again. Another bang echoed from the front door. I was frustrated and scared, but when I looked through the glass, I didn't expect to see the same cops who had been here before. They stated that they received a call from the tow company regarding some concerning items on the outside of the trunk that I assume no one noticed beforehand. They questioned me about everything I saw, and I told them about the man who had stopped by looking for his car. They left soon after, and I didn't get any real updates until later in the week, when the cops returned with search dogs to search the forest surrounding the warehouse. They said they found dried blood on the back of the bumper, and when they got a warrant to search it, they discovered even more blood inside the trunk. They believe the man may have come out to bury a body in the forest near the warehouse, but they have never discovered any significant evidence. However, the man never returned to claim his car from the tow company, and he never appeared again. He just vanished. It's terrifying to realize how close I was to a possible murderer. And for the last couple of years working at the warehouse, I'd get extremely creeped out when working nights alone. I knew it wasn't likely, but the possibility of the man returning and attempting to make me pay for what I had done lingered in my mind. I worked at a small local diner for a year in 2019. It was just a regular restaurant, and I was a server. Every night, the place closed at 10, but my shift ended at 11 because I needed to clean all of the tables in the back room before leaving. It was a typical night of closing alone. I just locked the doors. At 10 p.m., I started wiping down the tables, but after a few seconds, several loud knocks came from the front door, which startled me. But when I looked over, I saw a man standing there, looking through the glass door. I told him loudly that the place was closed for the night. This had happened before, so it wasn't a big deal, but the guy remained there for a few moments, as if he didn't understand what I said. I moved closer to the door. "Sorry, the store closed at 10 o'clock. We're not taking any more orders tonight." I spoke louder this time, and I knew he heard me. The guy looked at me for a second without reacting before smiling slightly and turning around to walk away. I assumed he was drunk or something, but after a few minutes I forgot about it and resumed my work. I finished cleaning the tables and began wiping down the front counter. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure moving towards the front door, followed by another knock. It was the same guy as 15 minutes ago, standing right outside, looking through the door at. I'd never had anyone do this before, so I was irritated this time. I raised both arms as in, "What are you doing now?" A kind of gesture. The man, still looking at me, knocked again. I abruptly informed him that we had closed and asked him to leave. This time, however, he appeared irritated by what I had said. He tensed up and gave the door a small push, as if to see if it was locked, before walking away. "What the hell is the problem with that?" I said aloud to myself as I walked towards the front windows to ensure that he had left the area. I didn't see him anywhere in the parking lot, so I assumed he was gone. Good. I checked the time and was slightly annoyed because it was later than I had hoped, but just as I was about to walk over to the counter, the sudden, loud bang came from the restaurant's back door. I was frozen in fear because I wasn't sure if the back door was locked, but a few seconds later they started hitting it repeatedly. Knowing the door was locked, I knew I had to leave while I still had the chance. I dashed out the front door and grabbed my car, calling the cops as quickly as I could. After a minute or two, I could see through the restaurant window as the man appeared and began to look around the entire building. Then he tried to open the cash register, but I believe he gave up after a few attempts and disappeared to the back of the store. When the cops arrived, they checked to see if the man had left before asking me for the full story. The back door had large dents in it, and the door handle was almost completely gone, clearly having been beaten with a hammer or something. Aside from the tip jar on the front counter, there was little damage or theft. I just find it crazy that some people are willing to do such things for a few extra bucks. Who knows what he would have done if I had been in his way?